What's up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of Chasing Tech. And on today's episode, we'll be talking about 4 ways that AR and VR change the future of work forever. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm Chase. And on this channel, we talk about how new technologies impact the future of business, health, relationships, and so much more. If you'd like to stay up to date, make sure to hit the subscribe button below. Now, let's go ahead and dive in. So on today's video, we're going to be talking about what AR and VR technology actually does for a society in the first place. We'll talk about how the future of work is actually heavily and closely tied to communications technologies. We'll then talk about what AR and VR will actually do for the future of work, and then we'll wrap up with some implications on society. So I did make another video on a similar note relating to AR and VR. It had to do with how the way things are sold is going to be impacted by AR and VR. And I laid a lot of groundwork in this video that might be useful to watch. So I'll insert a link or a thumbnail on this video for you to tap and be able to watch that if you're interested. But in that video, I basically boiled down AR and VR technology into a step along the way of a journey where technology is being used to create more and more lifelike interactions. So if you look at this picture here, this diagram was actually made in 1962. It's called Sensorama. You might have actually seen it before. And it's this concept of being able to experience everything that you'd experience in a real life interaction, but with technology instead, and it's done digitally. That's the key here, digital. So you look here at this diagram, they talk about 3D, they talk about motion, color, stereo, sound, aromas, wind, vibration. There's all these senses that are included in a concept like Sensorama. And what my argument is that, you know, back when we first started doing work as an existence of humans, even all the way back to hunting, that was all done physically. Everything about it was done in the present physical sense. And it wasn't until new technology started to come about where new ways of working became digitized, such as the phone or the computer to send emails, or even the computer now where we can have a video chat and actually see a person face to face in real time and talk to them. And the reason that this has happened is because, number one, a lot of work today is less physical and more dependent on technology communication. So if you think about your job, you may find yourself communicating more than anything physical you do, which is why these new technologies like the phone and the computer and the mobile phone over the last several years, last century, have become more and more relevant in society. And I think until we're able to basically recreate a real life interaction, but in a digital way where people don't have to physically transport themselves to visit with a person and can instead just, use the right technology to actually have the same effect without the transportation, we are going to continue progressing technologies to get better and better at digitizing communications. Now let's talk about the evolution of technologies and workspaces. Workspaces a couple centuries ago were factories where machinery was being used to create leverage. Then we moved into cubicles or office environments where maybe phones or computers started to be used to create a leverage in communication. And then now we have mobile laptops where people are able to work remotely and have a real-time video communication with whoever they like and do their job in that sense. So we see this evolution from factories where there's manual labor to offices where there's a lack of visual connection to where we are now with computers where you actually can have a 2D communications and be leveraged in that way. But it's still missing one thing. It's missing a lack of in-person interaction. You don't actually feel like you're in that same room with somebody. And the way I like to articulate this is, if you think about how computers are today, it's a third-person perspective. If you've ever played a video game, you can play in the third-person perspective and see your character running around in the game. Just like how when you look at a computer, it's from the third person. You're looking at a screen and you know that you're looking at a screen. Well, when you use VR, it's actually from the first person perspective. So you engage in an environment and you actually spatially feel like you're in that environment because every other part of your vision is covered. So really what's happening here is the technology is moving you closer into feeling like you're in the environment. And that's where AR and VR comes into play. So AR and VR creates an even more realistic experience and justifies even further the ability to have a remote work environment, because you can have more of that body language and get more of that in-person feeling without having to do the travel. So now I know what you're probably thinking. If you're like me at all, you're probably wondering, well, Chase, this technology, there's no way I'm gonna be wearing a VR headset in my job. If I think about my job, I'm professional and I'm maybe wearing a suit and tie. Why would I put a 5-pound headset on my face all day long? And I completely agree with you. I think this technology has to adapt further, but I think it is on its way to becoming more and more useful to digitize this form of communication. But if you think about it, what if the VR headset was lightweight and not noticeable? You could barely know it was on your face. What if it felt just as real to engage with somebody using VR as if you were there in person? I'm asking these questions because the future of AR and VR is filled with these possibilities where the technology is lightweight and it is not noticeable, and the quality is such that you feel like you're there in person. So we may not be in a position today where these technologies are really valuable and can recreate these in-person experiences, but we're definitely on our way. And I wanted to highlight that here to address what I personally have had as skepticism with 3D, VR, and AR type of engagements. Okay, now on to the implications for society. So when you have a world where people don't have to actually be there face to face, it opens up even more opportunity, to work remotely and have no geographic barriers. Right now, computers help us in some sense, but if you can actually feel like you're in person talking to somebody in real time, it makes it even less relevant where you're located. So I see it even further opening up new opportunities for people in other locations of the world that normally wouldn't have opportunities for a certain job or a career. And that also leads to more competition. But I really think that this is going to be a good thing because it allows people to do what they want regardless of their location in the world. Another implication on society has to do with the way jobs are measured. So if you think about working a salary job in an office environment, one of the stereotypes is the 9 to 5 type of working lifestyle, right? You go in the office at a certain time of day and you leave at a certain time of day. And it's almost as if these types of jobs are paid to actually be in a physical location, not necessarily from the perspective of measuring performance, but measuring time. So how long did Johnny spend in the office? I understand jobs don't aim to work this way, but you have to think about how the psychology of this works when a person knows that, well, everybody else is in the office from this time to this time, so therefore I am paid to be here from this time to this time. Well, when you work remotely, it has a totally different psychological effect. So I think that the metrics, as we've already seen companies start to realize during COVID, some of the changes they made, companies are starting to measure more on performance metrics and get clear about what those metrics are. So it opens up this ability for people to have a more flexible work environment, and it does make jobs more results-based as opposed to time-based. And so I think we'll see jobs become more based on results as opposed to time, which I think is very key to note because it becomes more important to develop your skill sets and become a weaponized asset in a company as opposed to somebody who is just paid to be there and sit at a desk. The third implication on society is the carbon footprint. So I originally thought that the carbon footprint would go down when I started thinking about how AR and VR would further increase the number of remote workers. But the reality is that even if we look at the pandemic related remote work and how it's changed carbon emissions, it's actually not had the change that you would think at first glance, because instead of creating these carbons commuting to a job, people are creating these carbons in different ways by working from home. And similarly, on that note, a lot of people are moving from big cities to small suburban locations that are further away. And this article I found from Forbes says it really nicely. They say the mass exodus of employees from big cities to the suburbs in the past year is a prime example of how carbon footprints are changing. The average suburban household emits 25% more carbon each year than the average urban household. Think bigger houses, bigger cars, less public transit. So remote work may increase overall emissions as employees shift from low carbon cities to carbon intensive suburbs. And I have to agree with this. As much as I've been working from home over the last couple of years, I've definitely leveraged more suburban-like abilities, like having home delivery. And although it may be more efficient for me, there's definitely a carbon footprint associated. And I think that these systems have to be updated and optimized to reflect how people are living today, where they were optimized before for the typical commuter, people who are on the freeway and driving to and from work. There's all these systems, even groceries and running errands, that are optimized for people to be doing that commute. But when people are no longer doing that commute, new systems have to be created. And then the last implication on society that I thought was really important to talk about is this automation threat, right? So if we are trending towards more remote work and people being able to work from wherever they want in the world, aren't we just digitizing ourselves as humans and making ourselves basically nodes in a network where we can be easily replaced with AI? Well, I think there is some truth in that, because I do think that AI is going to replace humans in a sense, but it's not in the way that many people might articulate as an existential threat, where AI is going to replace humans and humans will sit here with no purpose or no value whatsoever. I think what AI has the opportunity to create is the ability for people to outsource repetitive thinking tasks that normally you would do, but now you no longer have to do, and can spend your time focused on creating things. And if we think about how this has happened already in the past, we think about factory work. When humans were starting to see these new technologies automate factory work, people started going haywire and saying, oh my gosh, humans are being replaced. And there was this overall sentiment that that might not be a good thing. But if you think about what actually happened, people just started working in more comfortable environments. They started maybe working in an office, or maybe working remote as well. And this enabled a more comfortable lifestyle for people because of technology that automated a process that was physical manual labor. Well, if we think about AI, it's actually just the same thing as the factory revolution, where factories started to become automated, except with decision-making and thought. So I would call this thought automation, where if you no longer have to do certain tasks because you can delegate it to a computer to do it for you. And an example of this might be you get an email from one of your coworkers and you have a certain step process that you follow to complete a task. Well, instead of having to do that yourself, what if you could just delegate it to your AI, and using its own human-like intelligence, it can take care of those tasks and allow you to go back to focusing on creating something and adding value in a creative capacity. Well, I think that's exactly where things are heading, where the thought automation, the repetitive tasks where our brains are used to execute on things that can be figured out by a computer and just done over and over whenever needed. I think that opens up humans to do more creative focused work. And that's why I'm saying the future of work is creativity focused. So there you go. Some implications on society are geographic barriers, the way jobs are measured, the automation quote unquote threat that I think will actually help people live more comfortable working lives, and the carbon footprint that has to be addressed in some shape or form as the systems that have been used in the past are transformed to be more efficient to accommodate the way people are living today. And you might be thinking, man, maybe the work from home thing is not really going to continue. Maybe this is just a trend that people are not really actually going to continue following through with. And everything Chase says here is just kind of focused in on a very short period of time, not really zooming out and looking at the big picture. Well, on that note, I am going to share some of the findings that I had, because I also had that skeptical thought as well. Am I being too narrow focused, or is this really a trend that's going to continue shaping the future for decades to come? And I found this really good article from PwC where they broke down how the future of work is being changed by remote work. They talked about how a report found 36.2 million workers, or 22% of Americans, will be working remotely by the year 2025, which is an 87% increase from pre-pandemic levels. So massive change there. And they also shared that a global workplace analytics estimate showed 56% of WT workers, or 75 million employers, could work from home if their employers allow it. So not only is the number of people working remote increasing, but the number of people that can work remote is increasing as well. I think that has a lot to do with technology. And the last one that I'll share that was interesting was the CEO of Facebook stated he expects 50% of their workforce to be working remotely by 2030. So all these trends are showing people working remotely more and more and more as time goes on. In fact, it's actually really interesting because a study that PwC also did found that employers are more likely to say performance improves under remote work. So things like collaborating on new projects, securing relationships with new customers, coaching employees to succeed, all of these things are actually showing to be as good, if not better, than before COVID, according to the majority of people that are responding to these polls. So really interesting stuff. And that's why I think that this study they also did showing executives planning to invest in hybrid working, like tools for virtual collaboration, IT infrastructure to support secure virtual connectivity. These are all increased investment trends because people are seeing the potential and what that unlocks for their company and the productivity that can be accomplished. So I'll just end on this note and remind that VR and AR technologies are really just a single step in a multi-century journey towards digitizing communication. And VR and AR are really just one part of that, right? It's the digital aspect of being in a location, feeling like you're in one place. So with this, there's going to be a whole lot more awesome change and things just to be aware of. So my biggest encouragement is to think about how this changes your life, whether it's from a business perspective or even from a lifestyle perspective, and start to think about how you can take advantage of this to make a better life for yourself and be a better worker and have a better impact on society. Thanks for watching.